All right, so picture this. A town square, bustling, but instead of being like, a physical space, it's online. It's X, right? Millions of voices all day and night. But the sources we've got lined up today, they're taking us to some of the darker corners of this digital town square.
Yeah, it's funny because I thought I had a pretty good handle on X.
Yeah.
But these sources bring up some pretty unsettling stuff, anxieties about its impact on everything from like infidelity to the spread of Islamophobia even.
Yeah, and it's not just like a handful of complaints either. We're talking, one source actually says 1 in 5 X users have used the platform to cheat. I mean, whether or not that number is accurate, it makes you wonder, what is it about X that makes people even think that's okay?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And it seems like anonymity might be a big part of it.
Okay.
It's so easy to create an account. You don't even need your real name. You can just be like whoever you want. It's like it encourages people to forget about real world consequences.
Right, like anything goes in this online world. It's kind of scary when you think about it.
It really is. And this detachment from reality, that might also play into the alarming amount of Islamophobia our sources uncovered. One even claimed X doesn't remove 99% of Islamophobic content. That number, I mean, it seems incredibly high.
Yeah, 99%, that's almost all of it.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, how do you even define something as nuanced as Islamophobic? Where's the line? Is it like individual tweets or more these broader patterns of behavior?
Especially, I mean, when another source found that a huge chunk of this kind of content, like 86%, it all comes from just 3 places, the US, UK, and India.
Wow. So it's not even like evenly distributed. It suggests there's something more systemic going on there, something deeper than just the platform itself, almost like it's holding up a mirror to these offline biases and then amplifying them. Have you ever shared a news story online and then later found out it was totally fake?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're not alone. One source said 70% of X users have fallen for fake news. It just shows how quickly stuff can spread online, whether it's true or not. But then who is responsible for stopping it, right? Like one source blamed X for all the misinformation during COVID.
But then again, I've definitely heard other people blaming Elon Musk and all the changes he's made.
It's such a tricky issue. Is it the platform's job to police everything, or are we as users responsible for like double-checking what we see and share?
Right. It's that whole like balance between a platform's responsibility and, individual accountability. And then you've got the whole mental health aspect too, right? I mean, we've all had that icky feeling after scrolling for too long, but our sources go even deeper.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They talked about all kinds of issues linked to heavy X use. I mean, everything from anxiety and depression to loneliness, FOMO, even problems with self-esteem. I feel like it's so easy to fall into that trap of comparing your own life to everyone else's carefully curated online persona, and that's just not healthy.
It makes you think, like, are these platforms just making existing problems even worse for some people? Something to think about. And that kind of leads us to another, I guess, like dark side of this town square we're talking about, this digital one, hate speech.
Yeah, especially with Elon Musk and how much he talks about free speech. What his sources actually says that his thing about like absolute free speech, it's made X way more toxic than it used to be.
Yeah, and they weren't just like theorizing. They pointed to all those reports about hate speech just like going through the roof after he took over. Like there were certain slurs, really awful stuff being tweeted thousands of times, like within hours of, certain events. It's kind of, where do you even draw the line? When does free speech cross over into like harassment that needs to be stopped?
Right. And that question, it keeps coming up. And it feels like with a platform as huge as X, I mean, hundreds of millions of users, it's almost impossible to keep track of everything everyone's saying.
It's like, how could you even try to police that? It'd be like trying to have a police force bigger than some countries. And even then, who even decides? Like, what counts as hate speech and what's just someone expressing an unpopular opinion, even if it's, like, kind of out there?
Totally. It gets really iffy really fast. And then it becomes about censorship and whether the people deciding are being fair or not. That actually connects to another disturbing thing that came up in our research about X. The potential for, like, straight-up propaganda.
Yeah, that's kind of terrifying when you think about it, how what happens online doesn't just stay online. It's like, when governments or political groups figure out how to use platforms like this, it can have a real impact on people.
And not just in some abstract way. It can change how people vote, what they believe.
For real.
Yeah.
And it's not just about politics either. I mean, one source talked about how even like big companies, Apple, Disney, they've ended up with their ads running alongside like really hateful, toxic stuff.
Oh, wow. So it's like you could have some heartwarming ad about family and right next to it, there's this message full of like awful intolerance.
Total nightmare for a brand. I mean, talk about the opposite of what they want people to associate with their products.
For sure. And it brings us back to content moderation. Is it even possible for X or any platform to say they're all about free speech, but also actually protect people from harm, stop misinformation, and make sure they're not being used to spread awful agendas?
Right. That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, I don't think there's an easy answer. It's a huge mess.
It is. And everyone's involved, whether they realize it or not. Because whether we like it or not, these digital spaces, they are a part of our world now, for better or worse.
They really are. They change how we see the world, how we make choices, even how we feel about ourselves sometimes. So, I mean, what do we even deal with that? How do we, balance the good parts of connecting with people online with all the bad stuff that comes with it?
I think, honestly, the first step is just knowing what we're dealing with. Once we get how complicated these platforms are, then we can start having real conversations about how to make the online world a better, safer place.
Yeah, because it's easy to forget that we're not just along for the ride in this digital world. What we do matters. Every click, every share, it has an impact.
Totally. And that brings us to the real heart of what we're trying to do with this whole deep dive.
So we spent all this time, digging into some pretty messed up stuff about X, like how misinformation and hate speech spread like wildfire, how it can be used to manipulate people, and how it can even mess with our minds.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. And it makes me wonder, as you're listening to this, what's your experience been like on X? Has it been mostly good, a place to connect with people and actually have interesting conversations? Or have you seen this darker side we've been talking about?
Yeah, it's different for everyone, right? What really gets to one person might not even faze someone else.
That's true. But no matter what our own personal experiences have been, one thing's for sure. We can't just sit back and pretend this isn't a big deal. It's not enough to be oh, well, that's the internet for you.
Exactly. We have to educate ourselves, be smart about what we believe online, and hold each other accountable for making the internet a less toxic place. We can't just accept it.
It starts with realizing that these platforms, they're not just neutral tools, They're designed to grab our attention, keep us glued to our screens, and yeah, sometimes they totally play us, appealing to our emotions to keep us hooked.
It's like that saying, right? If you're not paying for the product, you are the product. We're the product. Our attention, all the data they collect about us, that's what they're selling.
And that has real consequences. We've seen how easily lies and hate speech online can turn into real-world violence, discrimination, even make people lose trust in, the government or science. It's scary.
It's all connected, online and offline.
Oh.
There's no separating them anymore.
So what can we even do about it? Well, I think step one is being honest with ourselves about how much time we're spending online and how it's making us feel. Are we constantly outraged, anxious? Are we letting algorithms decide what we see and who we talk to?
It's so easy to fall into that trap of just scrolling and scrolling. But sometimes we need to just stop and ask, is this actually good for me?
Right. And if something feels wrong, maybe a story seems too crazy to be true or an account seems fake, we should listen to our gut.
Fact-check everything, and be careful about echo chambers, those online spaces where everyone agrees with each other. We need to look for different points of view, even if they make us uncomfortable.
It's instead of just hanging out in the same corner of the town square, we've got to explore the whole thing, right? You never know what you might learn or who you might meet.
Exactly. And if you see something really bad, don't ignore it. Report it. These platforms depend on users to let them know when someone's breaking the rules.
We have to take responsibility for making the online world better.
It's on all of us.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, just remember, be present, think critically about what you see online, and get involved. Don't just let the digital world happen to you. You have a say in how it works. Choose wisely.